Okay, thank you, Ben. Welcome, everyone. On behalf of our college placement program at Seton Hall Prep, I want to welcome all of you to our admissions case study program. We have a very informative program planned for you tonight, as we want to give you an insight as to how a variety of admissions professionals evaluate the applications of our Seton Hall Prep students. Just a few general notes before we get started. This event will be recorded. Please remain muted the entire time so there are no disruptions. We will be sending the recording out after the event through the portal to both students and parents. The format for this evening will be each of the counselors will give a brief 2-minute statement on their individual evaluation process in order to reach a decision on a student. Following their opening statements, each counselor will take transcripts that have been provided to them for evaluation. We have selected 8 transcripts, which will present a variety of factors and will be a reflection of a class. We wanted to provide situations that would elicit the most relevant and detailed feedback from our admissions experts. They will evaluate the transcripts while articulating their thought process. This is designed to take you behind the curtain while giving an in-depth view of their process. Depending on time, there will be a window for Q&A following the evaluation portion of the program, and Mr. Laster will be doing that. By the way, if you have a question, just put it in the chat, and Mr. Laster will get to it, providing there's time. Now, I would like to introduce our guests and thank them in advance for coming tonight to participate in our program. Folks, if you could just say hi and wave so we all could meet you. First, we have Rose Leo, Senior Assistant, Director of Admissions, Fordham University.
And Rose, could you also say hi too, just so so everyone can see you if they're in that gallery view?
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited to share with you more about our review process. So thanks so much.
Good, thank you. Next, we have Lauren Elizio, Senior Assistant Director of Admissions at Gettysburg College.
Hi, everyone. Hope you're doing well this evening. Super excited to sort of demystify this process for you all as much as we possibly can.
Great, thank you, Lauren. Next, we have Candace Hightower from St. Joseph's University, Admissions Counselor. Candace.
Hi, so excited to see you all here. I'm happy to answer any questions that come up later.
Great, thank you, Candace. From the University of Chicago, we have Sherry Vernon, Assistant Director of Admissions. Sherry.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here with us this evening. Looking forward to speaking with you all coming up soon.
Very good. And we have Lowell Tillett, the Assistant Dean of Admissions at Wake Forest University.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Tom and Ben, for inviting me to do this, and I'm glad I'm able to, and looking forward to enlightening as many people as we possibly can tonight.
Well, terrific. We're blessed that you're here, all of you. Thank you. Panelists, if we could have you, just in a couple of minutes, give a brief description of your college or university, and then give a general statement as to how you read a file and the general process that you go through. Rose, would you like to start us off?
Absolutely. Thank you, Tom. So again, good evening, everyone. I'm here representing Fordham University, the Jesuit University of New York. We're a network of 27 institutions in the country, being a Jesuit, but we're the only Jesuit University of New York. I know that many of you are familiar with Fordham, and I think this is my 8th year, I believe, recruiting from the prep. So always happy to see the applications from the prep. Very quick overview. We are one university. We have 2 undergraduate residential campuses in the boroughs of the Bronx and Manhattan. We have 3 undergraduate colleges. So our 2 colleges of liberal arts and sciences and our Gabelli School of Business, which are both offered, or all 3 are offered across the 2 campuses. So when a student will choose to apply to Fordham, they'll choose a college and a campus. So a little bit complex, and when we're evaluating applications to determine fit and determine what a student would like to pursue in terms of study. And a brief overview of what or how we read applications. So I will see the application first, depending on if a student is applying to a specialized program like dance, theater, if they're a recruited athlete, any other factors. There may be other people in the office who will also review the file. But just know that there is never just one person reviewing your file. At the end of the day, we have our Dean of Admission, our admission committee, whether they're looking globally or they're looking individually at every applicant's profile and what they bring to the table. And how we can deliver, a most holistic review as possible, given our volume of applications of over 46,000 per year. And so with that said, when I receive a file from the Seton Hall Prep, what I will do is be the first reader, and in many cases, can make that final determination and recommendation of whether or not a student should be admitted. And so we have a holistic review of what we're looking at. So what exactly are we looking at? We're looking at a complete application. So a complete application that once all of the materials are submitted on behalf of the student, whether that be by the counselor, whether that be by the student themselves, it will come into my queue, if you will, as a complete first read file. And then I will see it. And that will consist of the common application, that will consist of the high school transcript, that will consist of testing, standardized testing, ACT or SAT, if a student decides to submit. As of last year, or for this admission cycle and for the following admission cycle, we are test optional. And so a student can determine whether or not testing would enhance or hinder their application, which we'll get into in just a few minutes with looking at the case studies. We look at their personal essay. We look at a letter of recommendation. At least one academic letter of recommendation is required. And then, of course, anything else pertinent, extracurricular activities, things of that nature, we will take a look at holistically. So it's pretty straightforward when a student will submit their application of how we will evaluate, looking at overall fit. Obviously, the high school transcript will be the best indicator for academic readiness. We've always believed that, and depending on how we decide to look at testing in the future, I think this year and next year we'll have some pretty good information as to whether or not, we'll continue with the test optional policy or what the case may be. But we do understand that, testing may not always be someone's strong point. So we're happy that we went test optional. So that's what we're looking at. Any other supplemental materials that a student would like to have submitted on their behalf, we will also take a look at. So whether that be a portfolio, whether that be recommendations from a coach or any insight if they're a recruited athlete, things of that nature, we also weigh into the decision-making process as well.
Terrific. Good. Rose, thank you. Lauren.
Sure. So hi again, everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm one of the Senior Assistant Directors of Admission at Gettysburg, and I've been the Jersey rep and in my position for the last 5 years. So always love to travel my great home state as well. So a little bit about Gettysburg. We are a school of the liberal arts and sciences located in South Central Pennsylvania. So from you all, where you're located, Seton Hall Prep, probably about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive, depending on traffic. So definitely a very doable location. Lots of students coming to us from the great state of New Jersey. As far as what we offer, 65 majors, minors, and programs. We're a D3 school in the Centennial Conference, so really competitive athletic opportunities for students in varsity athletics. But we also have robust campus rec and intramural options. We offer a conservatory of music, so the opportunity for students to study music in an academic way embedded in a liberal arts curriculum. So lots of interdisciplinary options there, which does make that a little bit unique that it is embedded in a liberal arts school, not adjacent to a liberal arts school. So that's a really nice component for our students, that you're able to study music and math if you want to. And it means that if it's something that you do extracurricularly, those opportunities are there for you as well. 3 things that I usually like to share about Gettysburg that are our distinctive programs. Our Eisenhower Institute for Public Policy. If you are interested in studying political science, public policy, having a career in law or in politics, think of it as Model United Nations on steroids. It's this high-level co-curricular opportunity for students to get involved in Washington, D.C., which is only about an hour and 15 minutes away from us. Susan Eisenhower, granddaughter of our former president, is still one of the leaders of this seminar style programming. So she actually leads a seminar on strategy and leadership. So it's pretty cool to say that you're on a first name basis with Susan Eisenhower if you're a part of that program. So great hands-on opportunities at a very high level. As an exclusively undergraduate institution, it's nice to have those pre-professional experiences that are going to set you apart potentially from other graduate applicants going on to that next phase of your life. Center for Public Service, we are very hands-on with community service locally and internationally, but not only do we do that active service, it is this idea of moving the needle on issues of social justice. And last but not least, we do have a leadership center titled the Garthwaite Leadership Center, so an academic and an experiential approach to leadership development for our students. That is like the Cliffs Note version of Gettysburg, but as an alum, I could talk your ear off. So I'm sure at some point in this evening, we will all either put our info in the chat box for you later, or your counselors will disseminate that. So you can always reach out to us with questions. As for our application review process, Gettysburg College does actually not read applications regionally. So I, as the first reader, can read applications from anywhere in the country. While that being said, I do definitely preference reading applications from New Jersey. So when I read my 600, 700 first reads each year, they are mostly going to be applicants from the state of New Jersey. And all of our applicants are viewed by at least 3 sets of eyes while at Gettysburg, or while in our Gettysburg process. So your first read is what I will do individually. And I don't typically say that by the end of this first read, we have made a recommendation, a terminology, perhaps like a recommendation for admit, for waitlist, deny, those types of things. We have more of a system where we are categorizing students along a ladder, if you will. So if you think of rungs 10 through 1 being the top, we are trying to categorize students and pair them with other like students when we review in our first read process. So kind of our best guess as to where the student may fall in the overall applicant pool. And that is, of course, done by reviewing the entirety of the application. Gettysburg is a common application school with no supplements, and we are test optional. So focusing primarily on transcript and those personality pieces, essay, recommendations, that sort of piece. If we have test scores, great. We've been test optional for over 15 years. We don't need them if we don't have them. We feel more than happy to evaluate test optional applications, and that policy has not changed. Then we go into the second read process. At Gettysburg, that involves at least 2 staff members. And during that process, your application may come up more than once. So we are not typically doing a one and done second review, but we will begin by looking at those rungs of the ladder. So we'll start at the top and evaluate those students. And if they all do look like that tier number 1, then they may be admitted as that tier number 1. But there may be some students that are in a tier that no longer look like their counterparts, and they may be moved somewhere else along that ladder. So that's the process that we are going through our second read at Gettysburg. And once we have sort of decided what rung a student belongs on that ladder, then we will move ahead and make an admissions decision, whether that's admit with scholarship, admit, waitlist, or deny. So that's kind of how things go there. Also, if any of us use terminology that is unfamiliar tonight, like please don't hesitate to pop it in the chat and one of us will clarify. But especially when it comes to application review, I think we all have our own little institutional words and phrases that we use. So please call us out on that. We'll do our best to explain, but let us know if we don't do it adequately.
That's terrific. Thank you, Lauren. Candace.
Hi, everyone. My name is Candace Hightower. I'm an admission counselor at St. Joseph's University, which is one of those 27 Jesuit institutions that Rosellen taught. So happy to see another Jesuit here with us today. So we are the only Jesuit institution in Philadelphia. And then I always say it doesn't always look like it. And that's because we sort of sit right on the city line. So half of our campus is in Lower Merion, which is a suburb of Philadelphia, and the other half resides in West Philadelphia. So you're sort of getting that traditional college feel with like the Frisbee on the lawn and everything else that you see in the movies, with the proximity of a major city to use for things like art, food, internship opportunities, job opportunities, and all of that fun stuff that comes along with being in a city. Similarly to Lauren, I'm an alum of St. Joe, so I could talk your ear off forever about it. So I think I'll stop sort of just about there. But we do have 3 schools. So our Hobbs School of Business, our College of Arts and Science, and our School for Health Services and Education. One part about our admission process is that we are major blind through the admission process. So it doesn't matter what major you're applying to St. Joe's under, we're admitting you to the entire university, not one particular program or one particular school. So we always say that we're admitting students because we think you're strong and you would do well in all of the programs that we offer here at the university. So talking a little bit more about what our admission process looks like from the inside, we also have first and second readers. Not every student makes it to a second reader. So if I'm like super confident in sort of my decision, similarly, again, we sort of put students with different tiers of students and then move through the decision process that way. But if I'm super confident and I don't feel like the student's sort of like on the borderline, I sort of submit that tier and keep moving. But if there's a student where I'm sort of like, oh, I interviewed with this student and I think I just really enjoy who they are, and I want to make sure that I'm giving the entire school grouping a fair shot, I'll send it to a second reader. Or if maybe a student has a super amazing test score, but the GPA doesn't look like it matches, I'll send it to a second reader just to get another opinion. And then further beyond the second read, there's also the admission committee where some students will also go. Again, more guidance, more eyes on the application. So I always say somewhere between 1 and 7 people will have their eyes on your application at St. Joe's. So definitely, be aware of, the crowd that you may be speaking to through your application process. Specifically, when I look at an application, I always tell everyone I'm a nosy reader. So I read the whole thing from front to back all the way through. I want to know where you're from. I want to know where your family's from. I want to know if you have siblings. I read it like I would read a book. And then I go back and then I read the school report. So your school will send a report of the school just so I have all of the things that I know your school offers in the back of my head. And then when I look at the transcript, I always start at the cumulative to sort of get an idea of where we're starting. And then I like to work my way through the year so I can see how your grades are trending, if you had a little dip sophomore year. So I sort of look at that quantitative data first, and then I go right back into the rest of the application to get the context. I tell students all the time, like, I can see the facts in front of me, but I'm looking for the context. That's what I want to know. Why did you have that little dip sophomore year? Like, I want to know all of the different pieces of what makes your application. And I really want to see you sort of come out through it. So that's how I look at the application. But of course, we're looking at the complete thing, holistic review. I could go on and on, but I'll pause here.
Terrific, Candace. Thank you. Sherry.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. I am currently sitting here in the lovely Chicago, Illinois. The University of Chicago is a urban, mid-sized university. We have about 6,800 undergraduates. We are a private institution, and we are a liberal arts college housed within a research university. And I bring both of those up because they both have a pretty significant impact on the day-to-day lives of our students. We only have one undergraduate college. So to keep things simple, we call it the college. This is surrounded by our other professional and graduate level schools. So if you've heard of a school that has a specific focus, maybe our School of Business, our School of Medicine, Engineering, those are all going to be at the graduate level. All of our undergraduates are going to go through our liberal arts curriculum, which is called the core. And as I said, our university has a pretty strong focus on research. We are the second research university to be founded in the United States, just to give you a sense of how far back that focus on creating new knowledge and coming up with new ideas goes. A few other facts about Uchicago. We are known for our intellectual curiosity and our specific brand of that, our specific type of creative thinking, lots of outside the box, lots of fun, quirky ideas. We have a relatively unusual, unique housing system. We are a very residential campus. We have our D3 athletics program as well. And like Gettysburg, we have been test optional for several years, even before the pandemic. So we have a lot of experience in getting to know applicants with or without the help of standardized test scores. So getting into that a little bit, when I read, Candace brought up my favorite word that you're going to hear us use a lot tonight, which is context. That's what any school that uses a truly holistic admissions process, University of Chicago is one of them, we're really going to be looking for and relying on that context. That's why I typically start with the foundational information. I will start with kind of a high level overview of a student's, I'll make sure I know where they go to high school, where they live, a lot of just demographic information, From there, I'll go into academics. That means looking at your transcripts, test scores if we have them, the school profile, all of that. And that feeds into the letters of recommendation, or that flows into the letters of recommendation very well. So I'll go through those. Then looking at things like extracurriculars, essays, and our supplement, which is extremely crucial in our personal decision-making process. As far as the more taking a step back and looking at the broader admissions process, like many of the highly selective schools that use a holistic process, our office is based and split up by region. So I cover the greater New York metro region. I will always be the first reader. And I do that because it's my job to advocate for my students. And I am the one who has the most context and knows your school's community the best. So all of the students are going to go through me first. From there, they will be read by at least one other officer. Then at the end of the cycle, we have a committee, which consists of several people in a room, all having very in-depth discussions and making these decisions together. And then, of course, our dean has the final say as well.
Very good. Thank you, Sherry. Lowell.
All right. I feel like a lot of what I'm going to say is reiteration on this, if I'm going last after such a wonderful kind of spread of views. My name is Lowell Tillett. I am going to hop on the alumni bandwagon. I am an alumnus of Wake Forest University. Wake Forest is located down in beautiful, balmy North Carolina, Winston-Salem, North Carolina, to be specific. We are a school of about 5,000 undergrads. So again, in that medium-sized category. A little bit different, I think, maybe. We are Division I in terms of athletics and the Power 5 conferences, so we compete in the ACC. We are by far the smallest school in one of the Power 5 conferences, so you probably have seen us playing Duke in basketball or playing Clemson in football or something like that. And we're kind of proud of that idea of being the little brother who pulls the upsets every so often. As a school, we are primarily undergraduate focused. We are a top 30 national university, like Chicago. And we focus, I would say, particularly on a combination of experiential learning and research. We had our 14th Rhodes Scholar in the past 32 years this year in Sovereignty Saka, which we're very proud of. But you're not necessarily sacrificing the personal elements of a smaller liberal arts education. So we like to think we have kind of the small college feel with kind of the big school feel as well. As far as the application process is concerned, I guess I'll just walk you through this. We're a little old-fashioned in a lot of ways, and this is actually really interesting to me to hear how other schools are doing it, because there's some similarities but also some differences. We only converted to online kind of reading a couple of years ago, so I distinctly remember having to like pull staples and getting paper cuts throughout this process. As any longtime admissions counselor will tell you, is kind of the worst part of it. The way that we start with an application, I think it depends somewhat depending on if you're applying early decision or regular decision. For those of you who are unfamiliar with kind of these basic terms, I think we can lump kind of maybe 3 rounds. So regular decision is the fairly standard, what you're accustomed to. I'm going to apply to this school and this school and this school and this school and see where I get in. Early action, some schools offer this and some schools do not, is going to be like an earlier version of regular decision where it's non-binding. And then schools that offer early decision specifically, that is going to be a binding part. So if you are accepted, you're basically signing an agreement as part of that you will attend. And that's very serious, and we expect to hold you to that. So the process, I would say, changes a little bit depending on how you're applying. Wake Forest does not offer early action. We only offer early decision through 2 phases, early decision 1 and early decision 2, as well as a regular decision round. For early decision, well, I guess actually the first parts of the process are going to be similar regardless. So the application is going to be read by 2 people in our office. The application itself will have kind of almost like a cover letter that we generate internally that will have a lot of basic information, where you live, your phone number, your email, demographic information, what are you intending to major in, test scores if you're submitting them. Like some of the other schools, we are test optional and have been for a while. We were actually the highest ranked test optional school up until the University of Chicago adopted the policy, and we are happy to see that. So things like that, just to give us kind of a brief overview of who you are. The application itself, whether that's the Common App, Coalition app, whether we offer a Wake Forest specific application, but know that there's no preference. It's whatever's convenient for you and whatever your counselors prefer. That is going to include, again, basic information, your personal essay, as well as the Wake Forest supplement. And it's interesting, Wake and Chicago, I believe, are two of the more notorious schools out there for the kind of wacky questions that we ask in terms of the supplement. So I appreciate Chicago being here, so I don't have to answer all those questions. After that, we look at the school report, transcript, counselor recommendations, and teacher recommendations. After that, we have actually an internally generated page that is kind of like a spreadsheet of both current and past applicants from the school, just to give us kind of historical data. I think one of the hardest parts of this process from the lay perspective is everyone wants this process to make sense in some capacity. And there are times when it's not going to make sense. We all look to historical precedent, and sometimes, whether that's, you know, a poorly written essay or something, things don't line up mathematically in ways that we anticipate them doing so. And so that spreadsheet is, I would say, take it with a grain of salt. And in particular, if you're looking at things like a Naviance spreadsheet or things, take that with a grain of salt as well, because there are factors that are not going to be captured in the basic kind of data with regards to admissions decisions. That is reviewed twice. For us, I will be the second reader as New Jersey representative. But I will also be doing first reads for other regional representatives in the office. After that's done, we'll go to kind of our group committee, and this is where the process splits because we offer a rolling early decision process. Sometimes we can't get a full group of the senior staff in the office at any given point to do a committee for early decision one, so we have a kind of a quorum system. But suffice to say, there's kind of like a big picture where other people outside of the region are asking questions that may not occur to one or two people as they're reading the process. I would say that takes on more significance in the regular decision round. For many of these schools, we are blessed to have more qualified students than we have spots for. And oftentimes, the decisions that get made in terms of the application reading are along the lines of, do we feel this person is academically qualified? And the answer to that may be yes, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee an admission. And so the big picture is very helpful, particularly to a school like Wake Forest, which is need aware, and we're going to be considering financial aid information as part of the admissions decision to create kind of a well-rounded class that is going to encompass a lot of different things, whether that's athletes for our sports teams, musicians for marching band, things like that. And so we may, as individuals, fall in love with an individual student based on their application, but just know that there's going to be a fairly wide perspective. I would say, in terms of personal experience, oftentimes our colleagues in the committee room are willing to offer us a pretty wide latitude if we feel very strongly about an application. So if we think that this is someone that is a really, really good fit for the university, we'll add in very, very kind of concrete, demonstrable ways. Usually that's going to be enough to guarantee an admissions decision. There may be some second guessing involved. A big part of the committee process is taking kind of the larger group of students that we feel are academically viable and admissible for the school and kind of creating an actual class for that. And so there is a bit of a winnowing process in that. And even if you do, you know, for a school that is selective, you don't necessarily get that good news. Maybe you're put on the wait list or something like that. It doesn't mean that they don't think that you'll succeed there. It may mean that they have a lot of students for not as many spots. And that's kind of an unfortunate reality of this situation. But one of the really nice parts is that there are so many awesome options available to you that you'll probably get good news from at least a couple of them. So.
Great, thank you. Thank you all very much. That's excellent. And, you know, we as parents appreciate the professionalism that you've shown. And terrific, well done. I'd like to give some context to what is to follow. The evaluation by our experts are based on transcripts and testing. And you'll see that as Mr. Laster pulls up the transcript, which is a large piece of the admissions decision, but certainly not the entire file. As mentioned, there are other pieces to it, such as the application, essays, supplemental essays, counselor and teacher support, and if applicable, interviews, and all are highly considered. We also did not provide majors or academic programs, which a student has applied within each college, because we understand that each college may not have the same same programs internally, and also may or may not have the same admissions criteria for each one of them.
And we didn't want to keep everybody 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly. So we would love it, though, if our experts can give us that type of detail in their evaluation if they see fit. An assumption on our part is that the evaluations will be based on the projections of 2022, not 2021. The 2021 cycle was the most, and I'll say it kindly, non-traditional in admissions history. And this may or may not carry on to 2022, and we hope that it does not. For students that we provided SAT and ACT test scores, we only gave the best composite. Colleges will also look at super scores and may also look into individual sections of individual tests. So we are going to begin with Rose from Fordham, as Mr. Laster pulls up the first transcript for evaluation. And if panelists, we could also speak to what we were talking about before, early decision, early action, regular decision, conditional acceptances, honors, and so forth, special programs if it's applicable. Okay, good. Let's begin.
Awesome. And then what I will say also is I loved all the description, and what we're going to try to do is there's 8 transcripts, as Tom had said before. So we're going to try to get to around that 8-ish area, for getting through those. So that's just to give you an idea in terms of kind of how we're going to go through timing wise. So, and try to leave some questions, some Q&A time. So, all right. So give me 1 second. All right. And then I'm going to pull this up. Can everybody just give me a okay that they can see this? All right. Thumbs up. Okay, great. All right. So Tom, you could take it away from here. All right. Actually, I'm going to pull this down a little bit just so you can see my note at the bottom.
Terrific. So you can see that this gentleman is applying test optional. He has a 3.83 GPA. And like I said, we'll go in the order of the introductions. Rose, if you would start us off on this gentleman.
Sure, absolutely. So, for Fordham, we will look at a GPA on a 4.0 scale. So being as though the prep is on a different scale, just know that we will convert that to a 4.0 scale. So just to right off of the bat, just kind of give you that context, okay? So he's sitting at a 3.83 out of a 5. And what are we looking at when we look at a transcript? We're looking at and some of you might say, well, hold on a minute. If you're making it a 4.0 scale, is it going to lose the value of those higher level courses that a student might be taking? The answer is no. As we mentioned, we're all territory managers here. We all will look at your SSR or your secondary school report that your counselor will provide. So we have that extra context, which Candace, thank you for using that word context. Love it. It's all about context. So, okay, what am I looking at when I see this transcript? Well, I'm seeing that the student certainly has, for the most part, an upward trend in terms of starting out at a 3.57, going up to a 4.0 and maintaining that, steady, the lowest that he goes after that is to a 3.83, taking honors courses since the very beginning of his high school career, which again, context, right? Honors and AP courses, if they are offered at your school, which we know they're offered at the prep, how have you challenged yourself to take those higher level courses as opposed to CP courses? Only you know how to challenge yourself to the best of your ability without it being to your detriment. So, we will take a look at your trajectory in terms of rigor. So maintain a steady B, I would say, with some A's in there as well. That's great. We see that the student has challenged himself senior year with an AP course, which for many students, junior, senior years is when students will pick up maybe some more AP courses. And so we'll look to see if that's on the transcript. Sometimes that's not always, like I said, in the student's best interest to take a heavy AP or honors course load. Something that's interesting is that the student is applying test optional, which we've received a lot of questions this year going test optional for the first time. How will that be, factored in when looking at my application? We're simply not including the testing, right? It's not to your disadvantage that you've not included testing. We just don't look at it, right? That's one thing that the student does not have to include, and we will just not look at. A student will not be at a disadvantage for admission or for merit-based scholarship by not submitting testing. Okay, so that's something we want you to know. But again, I think it's a B plus student here, challenging himself throughout. Now, the only caveat that I would say in terms of what we're looking for a particular program is, and I know all of you or many of you know this, if you're looking at Fordham, you're looking at our business school, we look at students who will have pre-calculus or calculus by the conclusion of their senior year in terms of fit and being able to do well at Fordham in the business school. So we see here that a student has pre-calc honors their senior year. That's great. If they are applying to the business school, we may want to see additional grades because we see that they've ended junior year with algebra honors. So we may say, how is a student progressing through the math curriculum at the prep? Will they do well? And the other thing I just want to say is this is all about when the student applies to Fordham, right? So are they applying early action, which is non-binding, early decision, which is binding, or are they applying regular decision? I want to thank Lowell for going over those rounds before, because it really is dependent. And I think this year you'll see that. After this year, you'll see it looks a little wonky. But anyway, so that's how I would evaluate this student. Now, if they are applying early action, there's a chance a student could be admitted early. If they are applying regular decision, again, this student could be admitted. And all the other factors that go into the application, such as the essay, the letters of recommendation, how the other students in the senior class are faring in terms of their GPA, what school they're applying to or college within Fordham. All of those things come into play. So just know that for this student, it could probably go either way in terms of being admitted, being deferred if they applied early, or being waitlisted. But this student would certainly not be denied admission from what I'm seeing here on the transcript.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, Rose. Lauren.
Sure. So before I dive into my brief evaluation of this transcript, if I can impress one thing upon all of you joining us tonight is that admissions decisions are very much a reflection of a specific moment in time. And so one of the things that we are all working really hard as professionals to balance is the art and science of the work that we do when it comes to making admissions decisions and, meeting the priorities of our institutions as they change, sometimes day by day in the admissions process. And so please know that as we go through these applications, in some ways it is very realistic because, many of these students will look great to us. As Lowell pointed out, we are all very fortunate to typically have more qualified students than we can award a space to. So sometimes our decisions may not be that this student could not be successful at our institution, but right now we are looking for a specific kind of student, a student that meets a specific institutional priority for us. So I think that is important. And so sometimes when you ask questions about application review and this process of an admissions counselor, don't hesitate to ask those questions and ask them at each of the institutions you are interested in. But sometimes our answer will be, it depends. And that truly is the most honest answer we can give you. So my take on this student is good kid, you know, pretty solid student. Again, with context, the prep is a great school, and we know that your students are being, you as students or your students are being challenged in a rigorous curriculum, even if they are not taking all of the AP courses offered. And so when I come across students from Seton Hall Prep, I'm always excited to see. I usually get fantastic students. And so I see a good mix of grades, that slight upward trend. So clearly the student is getting a little bit stronger as we go, but was not a weak student to start off with. I love to see that the student is challenging themselves a little bit in their senior year with that extra AP. Test optional, I think, fits the student's profile, unless there were scores significantly above our profile. Test scores would probably not have any impact on this read because they would be reflective of a pretty much A/B student that is improving. So if your scores were on profile, by all means, send them in. If they were above profile, they may have a little bit of a, you know, oh, look at that kind of tone to them. But otherwise, the student looks great as a test optional student. If this student were applying early decision, they would probably be a great admit, assuming that everything else in their application checked out. Hopefully there was some demonstrated interest or that they took the opportunity to interview. We at Gettysburg do offer interviews, and we strongly recommend. If an admissions professional strongly recommends that you do something, it means that you should do it. So for us, that is an interview. For other schools, it may be different ways to demonstrate interest if they track it. Not every school does. If this student were applying under regular decision and there were no other hooks, you know, so not a recruited athlete, you know, hasn't visited 12 times, didn't interview, this student is totally fine, may not be admitted on day one, may be admitted a little bit later in the process, and very well could also be waitlisted depending on the way that those institutional goals shake out. Not because, again, that this student is not potentially qualified, but knowing the rigor and context of your school, but also other applications that I may see. I do know that there will probably be students that are overall performing a little bit higher and maybe are scholarship tier students, but at some point in the process, the student would probably be a really good admit to our institution.
Terrific. Thank you, Lauren. Candace.
Awesome. This would be an application that I think I'd be kind of excited about. I really like to see that upward trend in those 3 years that are documented there. Also excited to see that there is a little bit of a challenge senior year as well with that extra AP course. When I read for your school specifically, I sort of keep in the back of my mind that if a student were to take all CP courses and get an A in all those courses, they would have a 4.0. So I just sort of look at it more of like there's a high weight to honors and AP courses. So this student sort of falls right in the middle of our profile, maybe a little on the higher end actually. So we're looking at, for our middle 50, about a 3.38 to a 4.0 on a weighted 4.0 scale. So this looks like a great student that would fit in really well with the students that we currently have on campus. Similarly to some of the other schools here, we are also a test optional school. We have been for 7 years. I think I know a lot more about the student based on the transcript and sort of seeing that increase over the 3 years than I could ever know about one Saturday in the middle of a pandemic. So definitely wouldn't be looking at that in any kind of negative light. This would be a student that I would be really excited about, especially if they had really awesome supplementals along with the application.
Great, thank you. Sherry.
Took me a second to find the unmute button. Thank you for your patience with that. All right, I will take 5 seconds to echo all of what Lauren said. Remember that this really is going to differ by school and it's going to differ by moment in time. So when I look at this student, I see that they do have a slight upward trajectory with their grade. We focus a lot on what we call trend. So if you were, there's a lot that can't be quantified, but if you were to try to map out grades, are they generally moving in an upward direction? Are they already really high, or are we going downward? We are, part of the reason why that matters is because we are going to look at the grades as you go along in your high school career a little bit more so than the grades when you first start out. So I get excited about the fact that the student has some A's as they go along, as they maybe get more secure and you know, getting a sense of how they study best. I do note that I'm not seeing any APs in their junior year and only one in their senior year, We do typically like to see students challenging themselves to the extent that they're able, to the extent that their high school allows, their life circumstances allow. That is going to be different for each student. So even within a school, I can't set any sort of threshold, but we do typically like to see a little bit more challenge than this. And then it's also really important that they're being successful in those challenges. So with all of that, the student likely would not be admitted to the University of Chicago, but we'll talk about some of those factors a little later on. The round and the test optional, the round in which they're applying early action, early decision, regular, and the fact that they're test optional would have no bearing on that.
Great. Very good. Thank you. Whoa.
All right. Again, I think probably echoing context is important, and this feels to some extent bereft of context. And so there's so much more that goes into an application, particularly in a holistic review, that you're not going to get from something like this. But even from a transcript like this, I can ask some questions. So the honors rigor was much higher in 9th grade. Is that one of the reasons why the 9th grade GPA was lower? Did they overextend themselves, take a step back in 10th grade, develop kind of better study habits, and then kind of gradually push themselves forward from there? I completely agree with what Sherry said, and Wake in terms of selectivity is going to be on the more selective end. So we do look at, in terms of APs, we want to see APs fairly early on. With that being said, again, the context of your own school environment, we're not going to compare you to a different school. So not everyone is a part of the Seton Scholars Program. Not everyone is going to be able to take AP courses in the 9th grade, and we know that. That's not going to be held against you necessarily in this process, as long as you're doing what's available to you. For us, again, echoing Sherry, that the 1 AP in senior year is probably below what we were looking for in, well, not probably, it is below what we're looking for in terms of what we'd hope for from a prep student. I do appreciate the honors rigor. In terms of looking at programs, we do ask a question on our application: what are you intending to major in? Wake is a liberal arts school, and as someone said, and I apologize for not getting the name right, we don't admit by major, but if we have a fairly strong inclination that you're going to major in business or something like that, then we may pay special attention to the courses in that particular area. So for instance, I would look and see this student has made straight B's in math classes. So if they were interested in something like business or engineering, that might be a little bit of a red flag as well. All told, I don't think the student would fare particularly well at Wake Forest. I don't think, even with the honors rigor, kind of the step back in honors rigor would probably be a little bit of a flag to us. And the fact that there's only 1 AP in senior year, at the very least, even if we were to consider the student, we'd want to see some grades in that before we make a decision. But on the whole, I think the student probably would not fare well in the Wake Forest admission pool.
Terrific. Thank you very much. Okay, Ben, if we can get the next one.
All right. Yeah, and for all of our reps too, don't be shy. You could say likely admit, likely deny. You could say the word deny. It's okay. Everyone will hear the word deny. So that's part of the process. Yeah.
I do think, and I apologize for discharging, I do think it's important to emphasize that likely part, because every single student is going to be evaluated in their own circumstance. Mm-hmm. And so there's not going to be a hard and fast to this for any of them.
And I think that's why, Lowell, even in the beginning, we threw out that there's a lot of assumptions, but I think that already you guys are doing a great job of giving an idea of how they would look and some of the things that are awesome and some of the shortcomings. So we're going to go to number 2 here. All right, Tom, you can take it from here.
Good. We have another test optional. This gentleman has a 4.51 GPA. And Rose, get us started.
All right. Well, right off the bat, I can see that there are a lot of courses taken every year. It's pretty heavy in terms of the curriculum and, possibly taking on, some electives, where they don't necessarily have to, but they elect to. So that's always something that we look at. This student would have no problem being admissible to Fordham. This is somebody where, to be quite honest with you, would fit right into profile. You know, you have a CUME GPA of 4.51. There's really not much to go in depth here in terms of, you know, anything except, you know, they've studied, great GPA. Like I said, a lot of courses, you see APs on there. And as early as sophomore year with the AP. So that's nice to see. The one other thing I'll say is that when I'm evaluating a student for admission, I'm also evaluating them for merit-based scholarship through the university, as well as our honors program. So each college at Fordham has their own honors program, and also we will evaluate them for not only that, but for the merit-based scholarship. So it depends on the year, and it depends on where the student falls within their school group. But in terms of merit-based scholarship, this student, not saying they would definitely get a merit-based scholarship, but they could be in the running for one. You know, so that's something else to consider as well. So all around, great candidate. If everything else checks out, seeing test optional, you know, no issues here. So I will kick it over to my next colleague.
Yeah, Lauren. Good, thank you. Thank you, Rose. Lauren.
I'll keep this one pretty brief. This is a great student, has clearly challenged themselves, and you know, having worked with your school for some time, I know that this is a really strong student from the prep. This student would absolutely be admissible and admissible with scholarship. So great job, no matter what round they apply to.
Very good. Thank you. Candace, St. Joe.
Yeah, similarly, this is a really awesome student. I would again be super excited about it. I think also this would be a student who would be in contention to have a very competitive scholarship, and also most likely would be admitted or invited into the honors program.
Very good. Sherry.
I love that when I look at the student, I see that they started in all honors and some form of accelerated courses. They're clearly very excited to learn. We love that. As they go on, they have a great trend in their grades. We often like to see AP Calculus if it's offered at a school. It's not a requirement. We have no required courses at Uchicago, but all of our students do have to take calculus at the Uchicago level in that curriculum, and we have no classes below that. So we do want to make sure that students are ready to jump right into our calculus classes. However, there are a lot of cases where that is explained elsewhere in the application in one of the letters of recommendation, or the student has made a note saying I had a scheduling issue, or there's a reason I chose not to take it, and that could be fine. At the end of the day, this is one that when I was reading all of these, I thought, you know, this could be a candidate. It would really depend on the round. The earlier rounds and the binding rounds are always going to be smaller, and it is always easier to stand out in a smaller group. We could make the metaphor of a, you know, a handful of marbles or any given object. And for this student, it would really depend on their supplement and on other contextual information. So it's possible if they applied early, but it's not what I would call a slam dunk. It's not quite a sure thing.
Very good. Thank you. Lowell.
So I will once again echo Sherry. This is more of a mixed bag transcript for me. I see things like the first 2 years of you know, taking the music classes, and I wonder why they didn't continue it. There's a lot to like about this transcript. The fact that they doubled up on AP Sciences in junior year, the fact that they're taking AP Stats and Calc Honors in senior year. This is a student who is pushing themselves, even if it's not reflective in terms of the total number of AP courses. And so this is, I mentioned on the last one that you know, not every student is going to be a Seton Scholar. Not everyone is going to have access to APs at, you know, freshman year. This is a student that is maximizing their opportunities to push themselves, not being in the Seton Scholar program. And for a kind of a highly selective institution, I think this is really, in terms of the rigor, you don't necessarily have to like copy and paste this exact transcript. But I do think that this is like a very, very good guide as to what we would hope for in terms of a progression of honors and AP classes. That junior or the sophomore year, the 10th grade dip is a little worrisome. You can see down from a 4.56 to a 4.2 back up. This isn't necessarily like a straight upward trend, but I do think that the overall kind of 11th grade really augurs well for kind of preparedness. This would be someone that I think we would likely take, almost, I would say almost assuredly take in early decision. In regular, it would depend a lot on context. I think Sherry put it very, very well. You know, if you're on the fence about this, you want to put yourself in the smaller pool to be able to kind of stand out a little bit more. And in the regular pool, without knowing the overall context, I'm not necessarily going to say that this student will necessarily be admitted, but this student would certainly be competitive in the regular round as well.
Great, very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, Ben, the next one.
All right. And I think I also, it's worth saying too, and I think, you know, Lowell certainly knows this too, that, you know, for everyone that's on here, the Seton Scholars, they take an AP course in freshman year, but I think all my colleagues on here know that we're going to have a lot of students that will be non-scholars, of course, that'll apply to these schools that'll have, you know, anywhere between 8 and 9 and 13 AP courses. So just worth throwing out there too. Just so you don't think all is not lost. But all right, so this is Tom. All right.
Okay, this gentleman is applying test optional as well.
Let me just make sure I have the right one here. Yep, sorry about that. All right.
Test optional as well. He has a 3.05 GPA. Rose.
Sure. So probably a good idea, the students applying test optional, because unless they have, you know, they hit it out of the park in terms of testing, then, you know, it probably wouldn't be to their advantage, because looking at the transcripts, it's pretty low. You know, I mentioned earlier about, you know, rigor and what we look at. We're looking at students, are they in an average curriculum, demanding, very demanding, most demanding? That's how we rank it. And again, it's within the context of your own school, right? So it's really hard for us to work with Ds, just being very honest. We look at context, especially in this case, because, you know, while the student does have a D their first year, if you look at their first year to second to third, there is an upward trend. Is it as good of an upward trend to be admitted? Different story, you know. What I can say this student needs to do is to really advocate for themselves. They need to have, they have to have stellar recommendations or recommendation, but more than one if they feel. Maybe in this case, it would be appropriate to have more support, qualitative support on their behalf. But I can tell you that it would be hard to work with. At the very least, we're going to ask for senior grades. So if a student applied early to us, they could be very well denied. But we could, again, depending on what other aspects of the application are presented, they could be deferred to regular decision with us needing senior grades. Now, we also, if a student is deferred, we ask for a deferral response. If a student doesn't fill out that deferral response, again, self-advocacy, they could pretty much probably count themselves out of even the running for regular decision. We'll look at them, but we're going to see that they did not follow through on their end, and we'll take that as maybe they're not interested. But again, they could very well be denied at the onset of if they apply early. For regular decision, it all depends on what my colleagues said about institutional goals and priorities. I'm going to just throw it out there. What if this, and it's because of the proximity to where Fordham is located in comparison to where the prep is and where some of the students live. What if a student applied, if this was a commuter, right? And they were applying as a commuter to Fordham. We needed more commuters that year. Okay. So again, I'm putting that, kind of on the back burner, but it's a nuance to a particular, point of the application that will depend on what the student is bringing to us. So, doesn't look good for this student, but again, it is an upward trend versus a downward trend. We'll want to see more information. Absolutely.
Terrific. Thank you. Lauren.
So this is one of those students that if they were to apply ED, they would probably be deferred because I will need to see senior grades. And again, it's all about a moment in time. This student could very much so be a waitlist student for us, but this student could also be a very late admit in the process, depending on institutional priorities. If there were improvement in senior year, perhaps more A's than anything, like this student may have a very lucky specific moment in time at the end of the process. But it would very much be based on improved senior grades, plus, as Rose mentioned, like advocacy. Have you demonstrated interest? Have you visited campus or interviewed or done these additional things? Are your recs outstanding? Is your essay strong? If those pieces are not up to snuff, the student would most likely be a wait list if there is not an additional hook or a reason to take a second or third or fourth glance at the student.
I want to jump in real quick, Tom, just one quick point.
Sure, of course.
Lauren made an amazing point, and this holds up on both sides of the desk. When we're advising students about schools that are possible, we tend to be very long-winded about it. If you do this, and if you do that, and if you do this, and if you apply in this possible pool, and you interview and all this different stuff, that's when you know this is more of a snapshot in time. It could be a 1 out of 50. It's probably not going to be a 7 out of 10 in terms of when it happens. So I think that's a great point. Our job on our end is say, do all these things. Like Rose had said, where she said, if the student does this and they do that and they self-advocate and all that, because that's what you have to do when you're not exactly where you need to be or you're deficient in certain areas. Sorry, just had to say that.
Terrific. Yeah, no,
Well,
that's great.
And to your point, Ben, really quick, families, this is why it is so wonderful that you are working with your counselors and students that you're working with your counselors, because we talk, we're all friends. If your counselors have a question about, is this student going to look okay, or how might they fare this year? We're going to pick up the phone and have that conversation. And so we really are working to do the best things for our students on both sides of that desk. We are admissions counselors. We want to see the best in students. We aren't, just slashing at applications, getting rid of, applications as we go. We want to see the best in students, and we'll work together to do that.
Yeah, I've talked to Lauren and I've been like, Lauren, I have concerns. Or I've said, Lauren, I'm telling you right now, this is one of those where you're to the point where if you think you might, you shouldn't have really, we feel great about where they are right now in their progression. Now, we're not always going to say that, but there are times where it works both ways. Sorry, Tom.
Terrific. Very good. Candace, St. Joe's.
Awesome. So the first thing I would probably see is that big jump from freshman year to the junior year. So I would be looking again for that context of what happened freshman year, my friend. So I'm also seeing this is not a strong math student, and that's fine. Not everyone is a strong math student, and that is consistent through the transcript. So in an odd way, I like to see a little consistency. It's not like the student is struggling in all areas of school. It's sort of this one area that may be a little bit of a struggle for that student. So I would like to know a little bit of that context. There's so many places in your application for you to sort of explain those dips and for you to really advocate for yourself through the application itself. This is also probably a student who I would encourage to interview. Down the line, I can see this as a student who goes to a second reader and then committee, because I love to see an upward trend, and that's such a big jump. So I would like the student to see a little bit of recognition there. But if the student were to be deferred, I have another conversation with the student where, being deferred is not the worst thing in the world. It not only gives you another shot at admission, but it also gives you another opportunity for potential scholarship. So really looking at that as another opportunity to really put your best foot forward. The student could be a lower admit, could be a defer, could be a wait list, depending on when they're applying in the cycle. But if they advocate for themselves, I'm ready to be their biggest advocate on campus. So.
Terrific. Oh, that's great. Thank you, Candace. Sherry.
This one will be fairly short. So at a highly, highly selective school, it is going to be very difficult to overcome a D on a transcript, no matter what class and no matter what year it happens. We can sometimes work with a C. Context is going to be really important. Did it happen near the beginning of high school? We look to see if it's a consistent thing, and I am seeing some consistent C's here. There are some times when life circumstances explain that, and that is completely understandable, but there's a big difference between a C and a D for us. I'm also seeing that the student doesn't have pre-calculus or calculus, and as we talked about, that's going to be another hurdle. So the bottom line is that regardless of test score, regardless of round or any recommendations, anything like that, it's probably going to be an outright denial in any round.
And Sherry certainly understands, and I know that she's probably thinking of this in her head. She knows we have calculus PC. So it's not, you know what I mean? The context is important school by school, as they said, by school group.
Okay, very good. Lowell, from
Right. Almost the exact same perspective as Sherry, with I think probably the same result, but I'm going to use this as a moment to get up on a soapbox and talk about test optional, and I apologize for that. I think Rose talked about this being a good decision to go test optional, and I'm not entirely sure that that's the case. And the reason for that, the point of a college application is that you want to showcase your strength. You want to showcase the good stuff. And there are certain things that you have to disclose to a college. You have to disclose your transcript. You have to disclose disciplinary violations. But the goal in terms of kind of a macro strategy for every single student should be, I want the school to focus on the stuff that I'm really proud of. And I think every student has things that they can be proud of. And so when it comes to something like test optional, think of this as an opportunity. How would you rate this transcript on a scale of 1 to 10? Are you proud of it? Are you not proud of it? Things like that. And then compare that to other parts of your application. The personal essay, I am really proud. I put a lot of hard work into it. If the test scores component are going to be kind of above what you'd rate the other parts of the application, that's probably a pretty good indication that you should include it, even if it's a test optional school. Some schools, pretty much every school, you can find kind of middle 50 percentiles, and you can certainly ask your counselors about, the range of the schools. Ultimately, even if this transcript is not going to be competitive at a school like Wake Forest, having a test score that is a strong test score, that's going to increase whatever chances there are. And so what you should really be looking at is kind of a big bird's eye picture of, can I use this as a way to kind of supplement, to augment, to increase my chances of showing off a strong part of the application. What test optional really means is that if the test scores are going to be the weaker part, then for philosophical reasons, schools remove or give you the option to not factor those in at all, and you don't have to disclose those. So for a student like this, test scores could make a positive impact. I could really see that happening. This is not, I would say, a particularly impressive transcript either in terms of rigor. There is that upward trend. It may be just be an adjustment period in 9th grade, but there's not even really much honors rigor in this transcript compared to AP rigor that we've already looked at. But a test score, even in kind of like a vacuum, might improve upon this transcript. I don't think it would matter for a school like Wake Forest. I don't think the student is going to get good news. I think this is a very, very likely deny for us, regardless of what round it is. But in terms of how you go about approaching test optional, I could see sending test scores being a net plus for a student.
Terrific.
And I'll just chime in just real quick because I see certainly both points. I think Rose is probably making the assumption, well, if our average for our specific institution is going to be around 1370, hard pressed to think that they may get there. But in Lowell's case, if he's saying, well, listen, if the student is applying to certain schools and it's more of a student thing, not a school thing, it's more like, well, if he's a 3.0, but he's a 1210, that could help him with 3 said schools. So I think it's good, both really good messages overall. And one of the most relevant topics and the most amount of time that we spend in advising students. It's more than ever with test optional.
Yep. That's the truth. And
Yep.
try to
All
do
right.
on that. Okay, the next gentleman. He has a ACT score of 34. That's out of 36. Has a cumulative GPA of 5.02. Rose.
Okay, so this student, and when I look at them, will have no reservation in terms of being accepted to Fordham, so long as the other aspects of the application check out. The ACT of a 34 is pretty solid and would be in range for Fordham, perhaps even maybe for some merit scholarship. 34 is usually around the cutoff of what we're looking at for our more competitive merit-based scholarship. Perhaps this student will be considered for the honors program as well. So no issues here in terms of the transcript. So I'll keep it short and sweet.
Thank you, Rose. Lauren Gberg.
Yeah, I'll also keep it short and sweet. This is a great student, lots of rigor. Assuming everything else checks out, this student would probably qualify for one of our higher tier scholarships. So great job, student.
Thank you. Candace.
Also very short, rock star student, likely would receive our highest merit scholarship, likely would be admitted to the honors program. No reservations in admitting this student.
Very good. Sherry.
This student is doing a fantastic job. I love to see that they're doing well across the board, which again, for the liberal arts, for a curriculum in which you're going to have to take a little bit of everything, is a really, really good sign. So overall, they are absolutely competitive, especially if they apply in an earlier round. We offer binding and non-binding. So whether I looked at them in early action or early decision, again, it would depend on their supplement and their interest in Uchicago, but they are absolutely competitive, even in regular decision, even with a stellar transcript like this. It is incredibly tough. So I would advocate, I think chances are significantly lower in regular decision, but they could be very successful in an early one.
Very good. Lowell.
Ditto. I mean, look, there's two. I think I see 2 A's amidst all the A pluses on this transcript. Like,
Yeah. A is the highest in that class too.
Okay, well, there you go. So clearly a wonderful student. Very good test score. ACT, the 34. I'm trying to think that's going to be like what, 97th, 98th percentile nationwide, something like that, maybe even higher. This is a rock star student, and this is a student that has done everything that would have been asked of them academically at the prep. I guess if I'm going to play the mean cop here, I might, in terms of the very, very high levels of Wake for our merit scholarships, we have 15,000 applications a year, and we give like 20 full rides or something like that. And so in terms of kind of the consideration for a scholarship like that, I know that there are students at the prep historically that have taken more AP courses. There are a lot of AP courses on this transcript. There are 9, but there are students that take, as Mr. Laster said, sometimes up to 13. And so in terms of the very, very fine margins that we're talking about, that may come into play. I think the student is going to be incredibly competitive in terms of either regular decision or early decision. We don't delineate scholarship money based on that, so they'll be competitive for merit-based scholarships at Wake Forest, regardless of which one they choose to apply.
Oh, terrific.
To
Very
reiterate what Sherry said, probably feel better about their chances in early decision, just because there are no guarantees in regular, but this is a student that's going to be very, very competitive in both.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay, Ben, let's go to the next one. It's been an interesting one. Okay, this gentleman has an ACT of, if we just raise that a hair.
Yep.
ACT of 32. He's also a first generation college attendee with a GPA of 4.26. Okay, Rose.
Sure. So I think that added context of first generation is really important to a school like Fordham, the Jesuit institution, and our founding. It is something that, you know, we pride ourselves in having a certain number and percentage of first generation students to create access. So again, one aspect of the application that comes into, you know, the greater picture of what we're looking for. So, you know, when you look at the transcript, there's, you know, an upward trend, you know, starting out with honors and some pretty, you know, solid course load. I'd say probably about a B+ student moving to, you know, an A, and then a mix of, you know, the B+ and A's as they continue their rigor on to junior year. So depending on if the student is applying to business or to the arts and sciences college, it probably wouldn't make a difference, since we see that pre-calc honors junior year and then calc honors senior year. So for us, you know, having that added context of first generation and a solid ACT score, admission probably would not be an issue. The question will come into merit-based scholarship, which might be another story in terms of what they could be qualified for. So that's something to keep in mind.
Great. Thank you, Rose. Lauren?
So this is a great student. You know, I think that ACT of a 32 makes this a very competitive student in the sense that, you know, yes, the grades are pretty steady. They've got some APs, so they look good. That 32 may, in any given moment, make them eligible for a lower tier scholarship. That 32 is kind of where we may start to look at some of those at Gettysburg. The sort of like note that I would like to add is, you know, first generation or any other sort of demographic information that can help provide us context for a student. So first generation can especially apply to many, many different students. But since this is kind of the only application where that piece is included, you know, we may also be looking to see if that student has a really long commute to school, if that student, you know, was transitioning from one community in maybe their local public high school that had a lower going college rate to a school like the prep where they're being challenged in a different way, because we do see those APs kick in a little bit later. So a student like this, I may dig in a little bit deeper to understand context. And if this student has overcome additional challenges that I can see in their application, that may, you know, have an impact on the way that I read this application, whether they are an admit or an admit potentially with scholarship.
Candace?
Again, another student I'm excited about. This looks like a really great student who is also interested in STEM and excels a lot in that area. So this is probably a student whose name I write down to reach out to about like other first generation STEM opportunities at St. Joe's. I see this student being admitted possibly with merit, maybe somewhere in the middle of the pack for merit. Maybe an honors recommendation, but again, it would be like that advocacy piece. So this is a student who for us could swing higher based off of, if there was an interview, what the rest of the application looks like, things along those lines.
Terrific. Thank you. Sherry?
Wonderful. I so appreciate what my colleagues on this call have said regarding first generation and that context piece. I'm going to keep mentioning that context word because it is so important. I love the mix of A and B, and with an upward trend, their grades take on that upward trend for the most part. There are a few waves, but that's a great thing. What I do see though is the fact that the rigor is not quite the max that it can be with the prep. Again, context is a really important part of this, and we do read holistically. Life circumstances are part of that. Some students are not going to have the support to take the same courses and perform the same as their colleagues. They might have other responsibilities. They might not just have had that familial support. And so all of that is considered. However, the biggest sign to me, the biggest point of concern that would be a discussion in our committee conversation is the fact that the number of APs goes down. They take 2 in their 11th grade year. And the fact that they don't keep it steady or go up and instead choose to go down to 1 in their senior year is not going to be a good sign that they're excited about the level of rigor at Uchicago. So overall, if giving them a decision, they're likely gonna be a deny. They would have a better chance if their rigor went upwards in their senior year, and always a better chance in an earlier round. And this is a case where it would also really depend on other parts of the application, but overall, probably a defer or a deny.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Sure.
You two, and then I want to turn it back to Sherry to see if this changes the decision at all for her. Do you offer AP Spanish literature or a post AP Spanish, or has this student maxed the Spanish curriculum after 11th grade?
They've maxed it.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lowell. So thank you for that. Overall, we still, especially with only 1 AP course in senior year, would want to see that go up, but that is a great point. We would take into consideration that any subject in which you've maxed out the options, that's phenomenal, and we're not expecting you to take opportunities that you didn't have.
Very good. Okay, Lowell.
So this is one I talked at the beginning about things not necessarily making sense from a numbers perspective. I think the student probably is going to be competitive at Wake Forest. And I would say that because I know internally that first generation students are a population that we are very, very interested in growing on our campus. From a pure kind of academic component, I would agree with Sherry that even with kind of the inability to take another AP kind of Spanish language, the AP rigor is probably below what Wake Forest would look like. But in terms of that first generation piece, and in particular, I'd say adding kind of the ACT score in there, I think this presents as a student that would be academically successful at a school like Wake Forest, and thus in terms of looking at the possibility of a particular demographic on our campus that we're interested in growing. We do have a specific scholarship fund and kind of mentoring set up specifically for first generation students on our campus. I could see this student being admitted to Wake Forest, even if the overall numbers might be a little bit below profile for what we would otherwise look for. I think obviously more so in early rather than regular. This may be a student where we may defer to at least see some senior year grades, but I do think the student would be competitive in our process.
Very good. Great insight. Thank you, all of you. Okay, Ben.
Sure.
Okay, we go to the next gentleman. Has an SAT score of 1080 and a cumulative GPA of 2.67. Rose.
This student would likely be denied, and here's why. Since we're test optional, and this is where it comes down to, looking at every institution you're applying to and seeing what their testing policy is. You do not have to submit your testing to every institution you apply to, because some are test optional and others are not. You really need to, this is where you need to do your research and look at every institution you're applying to, look at their school profile, look at the middle 50% of admitted students. And I know Lowell made this point earlier where he thought it would be advantageous for the students who supply testing perhaps. This is a case where for Fordham, you don't want to submit testing. It's not going to help you whatsoever, coupled with the lower GPA, the trends of the C's throughout. I think it was Sherry who mentioned, trends of consistent C's. This is a case where for us, you're consistently struggling and, it's not getting any easier for you as you move forward in your high school, rigor and years, where that's where we're going to see, if junior year is all we're going to see for you, we're going to assume that is the level of work that you're going to perform at when you're at Fordham, and that's just not going to be in your best interest because of the rigorous curriculum. At the very minimum, if your senior year grades are a completely different story and they tell something completely different that happened to work in your favor, this is where, again, self-advocacy would come into play. Mr. Laster, Mr. Filato might not say, I'm going to submit these grades on your behalf. You need to say, hey, I think really my senior year grades would work in my favor if I sent them in. You really need to be in the driver's seat here. And again, be your own best self-advocate. But really depending, it doesn't matter what round a student would apply for Fordham, they will most likely be denied. Okay, so.
Okay, thank you. Lauren.
So similar, I feel like I've kind of been echoing Rose in a lot of cases. This student is simply not going to be as competitive in our pool. Those SAT scores should most likely not be submitted. And, again, I do think that there is something to be said for lower SAT scores than than what is on profile for a school can sometimes still add a little bit of value to your application if they are strong in comparison to your grades. But if you were thinking that, if your scores are still 150, 200 points below profile, that is simply not going to be helpful for your application, regardless of if it is kind of accurate for your transcript or a little bit better than your transcript. This student would, if they had a phenomenal senior year and did everything right, would maybe be on the fence for waitlist, maybe at best.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Candace, St. Joe.
Yeah, so I would be a little concerned for this student. I'm going back and forth about the SAT scores though. Our middle 50 profile for SAT is an 1160 to a 1310. So the student's not too far off of our middle 50. I do think it helps add a little bit of context, but I'm trying to decipher if the SAT scores help at all or sort of hold the student where they currently sit in context with their transcript. This is a student that I would definitely be reaching out to interview, to maybe they want to get another letter of recommendation. Depending on how all of the other pieces of their application look, this could be a defer. And then I'm definitely going to want to see how senior year is going. That's sort of where I'm looking. Could be a defer, could be a deny. Also depends on when the student's applying. If they're applying regular decision, likely a wait list. But yeah, the SAT is sort of throwing me for a loop a little bit, I'm not gonna lie.
Very good, thank you. Sherry.
Thank you so much. This one is going to be short because we've already talked about how difficult it's going to be to overcome a D at any year, any subject. So this student would not be competitive and would be an outright deny regardless of the round, and the test scores don't influence that decision one way or the other.
Okay, very good. Lowell?
Same. Exact same rationale. It's already been explained. This is a student that probably should have gone test optional, but there's not any evidence here that this is a student that would be academically successful at a school like Wake Forest.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, let's get to the next one, Ben. Just a couple of factors in this one. This gentleman is applying test optional. He's also a recruited athlete. Your coach has indicated that this student is a top recruit in the class of 2022. and he has a 3.61 GPA. Rose.
All
Yeah,
right.
sorry, Rose, before you get, I apologize. I just, for this, I know all of your structures are different. It might be an academic liaison, but through whatever channel, basically you've been told either directly by the coach or by a liaison, if it's lacrosse, this is our number one attack on our board. If this is football, this is our number one quarterback on our board. Whoever it is in the cycle, that's it. So just to give a little more, Sherry said context, guys, context. All right.
Okay, well, certainly a great person to have review this application from an athletic perspective, since I'm the head athletic liaison for our office at Fordham. I work, with our 3 liaisons. So the 3 liaisons and myself cover 22 Division I sports. Where we work with the coaches. I alone have 9 sports. So, certainly understand the complexities and can appreciate the complexities and I'll say the goals and priorities of not just the university, but for the individual sport and for the coaches, right? Just as we have to recruit a class of first-year students, so do the coaches, and they have a less to work with, in making their roster. So with all that being said, when I mentioned earlier of how we review applications at Fordham, this is a prime example of how there is not just one person looking at your application. So in this case, it will include the athletic liaison for that sport, advocating for this potential or what we like to call prospective student athlete, a PSA. And what they'll do is they'll bring to the, in our office, the territory manager, if there's anything in question that looks like it could go either way, right? We want to maintain the relationships we have within the schools. We want to know the high schools. We want to know what level priority is this recruit? Are they going to be a scholarship athlete? Are they signing a national letter of intent? Or are they a walk-on? All of these things will come into play when a coach presents to a liaison into the admission office this PSA. So for us at Fordham, we're looking at this student here. They're test optional. Again, testing may or may not come into play, or rather, testing may or may not be in the best interest of the student to submit. Here's something that, because we just went test optional and the NCAA had waived initial eligibility for presenting testing to the NCAA, it was easier for us to fall in line with, okay, then PSAs, prospective student athletes, will follow the same protocol as our general admission pool, which is they have the option to submit testing or not. Obviously, news will come down the pike for what next admission cycle will look like, but we had leaned toward that to be consistent. So could be is test optional, wonderful. For us, we're probably going to want to see senior year grades. We have no problem as liaisons going back to the coach to say, we need more information. If we do not feel confident in the decision, whether they are the star quarterback, if they are, whatever the case may be, if we need more information, this is an example where we will ask for that. If a student is applying, this particular prospective student athlete is applying for the Gabelli School of Business with the C+ junior year in pre-calc honors, we may or may not decide to move on that with the information we have here. Again, this might be a case where we say, want to see how senior year is going, make sure that the track of C's don't continue, throughout senior year. But for us, this would be a pretty straightforward case. I'll be completely honest with you. In my short term time of being the head athletic liaison, just a few years, I have seen far worse. I'm going to leave it at that. So for us, this would be not too bad, pretty routine. So I will pass it along.
It'd be workable, right, Rose? It'd be workable.
We could work with this. Yes.
It'd be workable.
Good, thank you. Rose, Lauren.
Sure. So to keep it somewhat concise, I echo a lot of, again, what Rose has said, but this is by no means the absolute strongest student in our pool, and probably is not the strongest athlete that we will see. But again, knowing that the student attends a strong school, has challenged himself with honors, and has been fairly consistent as a B student with some A's, we typically can forgive a small blemish on a transcript. Perhaps maybe it's some of us in the office who also did not do so hot in pre-calculus back on our day. Sometimes we are able to forgive something that is truly just a single blemish on a transcript, giving you the benefit of the doubt, as long as it's not a repeated habit. As long as the student has done everything they were supposed to do as part of the recruitment process and the admissions process, chances are the student would look fairly good for an admit. Part of that is that early read process, where the student may have been informed of where they may fall in the where they may fall sort of in our tiers and things like that. So again, if they did everything right, the student could be a very good straight admit. If they did not do everything right, there may be more of a conversation around that, because like I said, we probably would have academically stronger students. At a school, even a D3 institution, I really do like to share though that just because a coach likes you does not mean you are automatically in. I think there's a lot of conversation or ideas that coaches have complete power over that, or they have slots and things like that. But in a lot of cases, you still need to be able to cut it at the school that you are trying to go to, because coaches are not also going to be your tutors and babysitters. And so making sure that there is good communication between the coach and the admissions office is key, but you need to make sure to stay on top of both ends of that process.
Very good.
Great
Candace,
point.
great point.
Awesome. This student, regardless of being a recruited athlete, would probably be an admit. They're a solid student. They fall right in the middle of our profile. So I don't see any hesitation along those lines. The lack of rigor may affect or impact those tiers that we talked about a little bit earlier. But other than that, I see the student being an admit, and even better that they are a recruited athlete.
Mhm. Very good. Thank you. Sherry.
Perfect. Thank you. I am going to echo some of what Lauren so eloquently said. At a D3 school, the student part of student athlete is going to carry a really heavy weight. And we do, even in our pool of recruited athletes who are, applying early to Uchicago and making that commitment, we are going to see more competitive academics. When I look at this transcript, what I'm noticing is that there are no AP courses, and we've even seen transcripts today and talked about transcripts in the last hour that have included more honors courses than I'm seeing. So at the end of the day, probably the student would not be competitive, not because of grades, but specifically because of that rigor piece. To have the best chance, they would have to be ED or one of those situations where you really are binding. And it would also depend on other circumstances. Is this a position that we really need? And, on our sports teams, other situations like that. But overall, probably not going to be competitive.
Okay. Fair enough. Lowell.
So if you've been watching me, I've been laughing for the past 5 minutes about this. So I don't know if you intended to do this to me. For those of you who are not familiar,
Yes.
Wake Forest is one of the schools that was implicated in Varsity Blues. And so we are currently under audit by the Department of Education, and will be for the foreseeable future, about every single recruited athlete. And that leads me to basically, I guess I have two comments about this. One, when we talk about, and I talked earlier about kind of creating a well-rounded class, part of that, a big part of that is academic, but a part of that is talent as well. We may be able to find spaces for students who may be slightly below profile, but who add other things to campus. There's an exceptionally talented trombonist or something like that. particularly, I would say for kind of D1, D3 type athletes, I think athletic talent can be part of that well-rounded pool. For the level at which Wake is competing in Division I athletics, that kind of goes out the window. D1 athletics is its own thing in many different ways. My one concern here is with the test optional or as an athlete. I guess my question, I'd probably be on the phone with the counselors just to make sure that this is a student that passes the NCAA clearinghouse for athletes. Even for a school that is at test optional, I know that the NCAA, and given that we are under extra scrutiny as a school, probably wants to make sure that all of our I's are dotted and T's are crossed, doubly so. And so that would be my only concern, but particularly that given this is someone that we would like to succeed on the field or on the court, I suspect they would be admitted to the school.
And Lowell, our angle with this certainly wasn't the litigation piece. Believe it or not, when I was speaking to Tom, I said, Lowell is going to be, the Power 5 Division I revenue producing sport, so it's, so that was more the angle, just to see kind of how that worked. Cause I knew that your structure was different than, some of the others, specifically with football. So
we're paying.
Our heart was in the right place. Trust me.
No, I appreciate it. We're paying Dave Clausen. I don't know how much money we're going to give him the tools to succeed and to beat Clemson in football. And it's going to happen one of these years. So.
Yep. He's a great guy. The last one, Ben.
All right.
Okay, we have a gentleman who has a 1310 SAT. This student is a double legacy, meaning both parents attended your school. He has a 3.29 GPA. And right after this, Ben will take over in the chat and question area, and then I will close. So this is our last transcript. Rose, please start us off.
Sure. So definitely a commonly asked question about how legacy plays into the admission process at Fordham. And so while we do ask that question on the common application, specifically on what's called our member page, so specifically for Fordham, we like to see, has there been anybody, in your family who has attended Fordham and or is employed at Fordham? With that being said, it is by no means shoe in, as what people like to call it. And so it's one of the many factors we take into consideration, but it is not something that will tip a student in if they are not otherwise admissible. In this particular case, the testing is that's been presented is on the lower side, absolutely, than our middle 50%. And so this is somebody, when you just look at testing, it can go either way with. If they applied early, they could very well be deferred. If they applied regular, they could be waitlisted. Now, couple that with the GPA of a 3.29, the level of rigor, or rather the heavy, college prep, and not really too many honors, or I don't think there are any APs. There's AP Studio Art senior year, but that's really about the extent of that. Coupled with the trending of C's, this student at best, if they applied early, would be deferred. If they applied regular, would probably be a good waitlist student. We might, again, depending on where we are with making the class, institutional goals, this is really a case where the student can go either way, really depending on that self-advocacy beyond the student being a double legacy, because that really wouldn't come into play. So what are they doing beyond that to show demonstrated interest, to advocate for themselves with sending in senior grades? But again, this could be a very good waitlisted student, depending on where we fall later on after May 1. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Rose. Lauren.
So when I talk about legacy, I refer to this as one of those pieces that is never a guarantee, but is often one of those like tags that will make us do a double look at a student. This student is not on profile for our institution and would, not be the first admit in our pool. But, as we get toward the later ends of the process, that double legacy may make us take a second look with a little bit more consideration. That is not enough to get this student in. If we see an exceptionally strong senior year, if everything else was done correctly, maybe this student would squeak in. That 1310 is pretty good in contrast to their transcript. So in this case, that SAT score may be beneficial for this student. But I would say if it is a competitive year, the student would most likely be waitlisted despite having parents that went to our institution.
Great. Thank you. Candace.
So the SAT score from our perspective, so St. Joe's perspective, definitely helps out the student in this context. I would be looking at this with a little bit of hesitation, just because it seems like the student got a little comfortable with the C's. So I would want to see senior year grades, even though this is not the lowest GPA we've seen tonight. I would just want to see sort of how that's going, if we're just going to sort of senior slip or slide through the end, or if we're really going to pick it up and try to turn things around. Similarly, the double legacy is just going to make us take another look. This student would likely be deferred, I believe. And then hopefully senior year turns around and then maybe gets another look.
Good. Thank you. Sherry.
Thank you so much. Candace put one of my concerns so well, that idea of whenever a trend plateaus, that can signal that a student just got a little bit comfortable, and we would like to see that trend be a little bit higher. Legacy, let's talk legacy for a second. This is not, there is no points system. There is no sheet that I'm filling out. The reason why legacy students one thing we tend to see with legacy students is that they tend to put together really strong, sometimes supplements. They tend to write a great essay about why it is that they want to attend Uchicago. They were brought up with the type of thinking that we're looking for in that quirky extended essay question. Those two things make up our supplements. And so they're not given any sort of priority. There's no advantage that they're given aside from just being brought up in and having a very good understanding of the University of Chicago culture. That being said, it still is going to be very important, even if they have the most stellar supplement that I've seen, for them to be comfortable academically at Uchicago. And that's something that I worry about a little bit here with no AP courses and some of the rigors a little bit lower than other ones we've seen tonight. So overall, while there's a chance if they applied early that we would defer them, it's overall probably going to be a deny. I also want to make one note. I see that they do have AP studio art. I am speaking specifically about their core classes. So I'm not seeing any APs in those 4 or 5 big core areas.
Sure, understood. Thank you. Lowell.
I will echo Sherry's point. There's very little on this transcript that points to academic success at a school like Wake Forest. And that doesn't change based on who your parents are. It doesn't change in your background. And yes, there can be a wonderful essay about our motto Pro Humanitate and kind of the service background that we really admire and try to instill in students. But this is a student that if we were to admit them to Wake Forest would struggle. And so we are very, very unlikely to do so. Whether that's a wait list, whether that's probably a deny for this student.
Okay.
All right, great. Well, I'm in the interest of time, it's 8. I had said in my first, I don't want to lie twice. That's my intention. All right. So in my first notes, everyone, I said we would be done between 8 and 8:30, and I do want to keep to that. However, I did say we would have some Q&A, and I really don't think we're going to have the time for that. So I'm going to do something presumptuous, and I hope that my colleagues on here don't hate me. But if you do have questions, I would hope that you'd be able to say to, whether it's Lowell or Candace or Sherry, Rose, say, listen, I was on the the session for Seton Hall Prep, and I wasn't able to get this question answered. Is that okay, guys?
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's fine. Okay, good. You're making me feel okay about lying to our community and saying we would have a Q&A. But instead of that, in lieu of that, just beforehand, I'm gonna forego the Q&A. And if you guys could just give a brief 30-second kind of like where these students are. They're class of 22, going into the spring and into the summer, going to be applying soon. I love the different perspectives just from your seat. 30 seconds, 45 seconds, your best advice you can give them going in the same order.
Best advice would be, this has been a very different year for us due to the pandemic and due to just the way college admissions is playing out. I think we're going to have a better sense of what everything will look like once we shape and make our class. So bear with us, but also ask questions, because this was such a different year. And hopefully we can go back to what things were like beforehand, but I mean, who knows? So you really just want to ask those questions, be very pointed, whether it be about class profile or, anything like that, that can best position you in separating yourselves from your peers. Don't take anything for granted and think that we are going to overlook anything. We are not. We are going to see everything you put in your application, and that could work against you or it could work in your favor. So do not underestimate that. But enjoy the process. Again, do your research. This has been a very interesting year so far. I think my colleagues would agree.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lauren.
So my piece of advice to juniors sort of starting this process and getting underway is always to learn the art of introspection. And I know that sounds like really lofty thanks to my liberal arts education, but what I mean by that is this is a really important process, and there's really no right way to go about it, and there's no right thing that's going to make the right decision for you. So take time to sit with yourself and figure out what feels important to you. Your counselors can help you start and begin to navigate that conversation, but whatever is important to you in this process is what will help guide you. You will be a good fit for more than one school, and many schools will be a good fit for you. So having sort of a cardinal direction, if you will, by sitting with yourself and figuring out what key things you're looking for is going to be really helpful. It's also a really good skill to learn now, because in college, you will have so many more opportunities than you've ever had access to in even your high school career at a great school like the Prep. You will get to take courses and things you've never heard of, try different, pre-professional opportunities, internships, clubs, organizations. You can't do it all. So having a sense of self and sort of knowing what matters to you will help guide that as well. So that's always my advice. Easier said than done, I know, but I do feel very strongly about it.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Candace.
I would say be your best and most authentic self through the process. I think we do a really good job of seeing who is being genuine through those essays, especially if you are doing a holistic review process. But maybe even more important, I know this process can be kind of heartbreaking for some students, because you are going to hear a vast sort of series of answers or responses from schools, and you are allowed to be just as selective as the schools that you apply to. So it's not always I hope they really like me, I hope they really like you. Make your schools say, oh, I hope the student really likes us. I hope the student wants to be here as much as they want to be here, or as much as we want you to be here. So that would be my sort of little piece of advice there.
Terrific. Thank you, Candace. Sherry.
Perfect. Candace and Lauren hit upon two of the points that I like to speak about and make sure that folks take away. So I will switch and impress upon you a point that I really try to end with in most of my sessions. This process is very exciting. It might be one of the first times you get to really explore this and make a major decision, but it can also be tiring, especially if you are doing most or all of it virtually, especially after a year of a global pandemic. And I can imagine how it would start to all blur together and seem like a lot of students are the same. You all have a lot of advantages and opportunities that many students don't get to have. You have a phenomenal guidance counseling team. You have adults who are putting together events like this, and you have opportunities to start thinking about the college process early and start chatting with admissions officers like the ones on this panel. So and in addition to that, you have also taught yourself how to work really hard. You've gotten yourself this far. So as long as you keep taking deep breaths, breathe with me, as long as you also keep using these resources that you have and keep working just as hard as you've already taught yourself to work, you are going to be just fine, regardless of what any individual decision letter comes back saying. I promise, I promise. Great,
thank you, Sherry. Lowell.
I think they hit most of my points as well. This is one of the bad points of going last. I guess maybe the thing that I would say, it's okay to not know. And it oftentimes feels like everyone around you, whether that's the adults or whether that's your peers, it feels like they have like all the answers to all of life's questions, and they know exactly what they're going to do, and they have their entire life planned out. And no, they don't. And I'm going to go and tell you that no, they don't. They pretend like they do, but they don't. And so if you're doubting yourself, if you're not quite sure about X, Y, or Z, that's okay. It's okay to go and ask questions. It's okay to admit that you don't know everything in this process. That's why you have counselors at your high school. It's why you have teachers. It's why you have mentors. It's why you have college representatives you can reach out to. Is because it's okay that you can kind of grasp that idea. And this goes with Lauren's idea of introspection, I think, a little bit, but ask questions. Just know that it's okay, and that everyone, regardless of whether they pretend to know and pretend to have everything figured out, everyone's in this boat with you, and it's okay to admit that.
Terrific. Then a couple of words before I close.
Yeah. So no, I'm good. Tom, you can close it's all you.
Terrific. I'd like to thank three groups tonight. First, the parents. Thank you for coming. Thank you for sharing your students with us. And I hope you got a lot out of it. There were so many great things that we heard tonight. And, I thought it was great. The second person I'd like to thank is Ben Laster for the vision of our college placement program and the support, the tremendous support he gives for all of our Seton Hall Prep students. You need to know that. He is right in there, and he does so many things behind the scenes to make this the best college program you can have. And, I also thank him for the support that he gives counselors like me and the other counselors in college placement. And the third group,
thank you.
Absolutely. The third group is our panel. It's obvious why you are the best at what you do. And one of the things that I think it's hard to do in a situation like you're in is, on the one hand, be totally professional and knowledgeable, which you obviously are. The other part, and this I think is the hardest, and if I was an admissions counselor, I would hope I would have this too. You are very caring. It is obvious that you care about the students, that you care about your institutions, you care about each other. You're very supportive of each other. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that comes across. And certainly for those of us in high school, we really appreciate that for sure. So thank you for giving us your time, your expertise, and your knowledge. To the Seton Hall Prep community, can't wait for tomorrow morning to see you all, and look forward to meeting with our guys. So good night. thank you again, and may God bless all of you. Thank you. Good night, everybody. Panel, thank you.
Thank you very much. Y'all are exceptional. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
night.
you so much. Have a great night.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherry.